I was wondering if I should bring up what you sent me a message about. Maybe I'll let you talk about it, but you had a phrase which was authentic resonance, and part of why it comes up is it seemed that it was an exploratory thing that the dialogue itself, might help us play with it, and sounded like fun. But what's authentic resonance for our
Yeah.
vast audience of listeners who are
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah. May or may not be there. I'm always weary when a term like that pops into my mind to pretend that I have somehow come up with it. I am sure that authentic resonance is, it may be something I've heard somewhere, I'm sure. But there's something about the bringing of those two words together that speaks to something I'm looking for anyway. Um, so when I'm working in therapy, there's a lot of focus on obviously the emotions, so helping a person, better understand and connect into their emotions. So there's a lot of inward connection, and obviously sensations in the body. And then I've just been thinking more and more about what can happen in therapy, sort of more on the other side of that, is when people come to a place where, how would I describe it? It's like a lot of the blockages have been resolved, and there's just clearer access to something in them. This is how I think of it anyway. There's clearer access to something in them that just allows them a more ready connection with their true will, like their authentic. So what I mean by that is when being faced with a decision that might not be clear cut one way or the other, a person's ability to make a decision. This is just one example, and to just have that there is some kind of feeling that goes with being at peace with the decision you made. And by peace, I mean somehow it sits right with you on your most, depends how you want to talk about it. I sort of talk about it as like your most base level, or like your core, at your most your core, your most undefended kind of position. For some people, I think though, it would be more about um, it's you have more access to something which is maybe the transpersonal, like you're clearing out stuff, which then allows maybe more like a divine will for you to have connection to something more like a divine will. But however you want to talk about it, there is something about once you do enough work on defensive structures that allow a person to have a clearer access to their emotional landscape, there is something that can come with that around it's just easier for a person to make decisions, right? And this goes hand in hand with things like agency, obviously, and autonomy. And when I make a decision in a particular scenario, just knowing, sometimes we use that phrase deep inside myself, right? Or in my heart of hearts, just knowing that that is in alignment with, so hard to talk about. And this is the challenge of it. It really is hard to put words to, because every time I go to put a word to it, I think of all the other things that word is associated with. It's not that. So I'm just fumbling around in the dark, but there's a peace, there's an alignment, there's a resonance. And I think that's why I use the word resonance. The sense for me is it's like there's a clarity between noticing the situation you're in, obviously having your emotional reactions to that, but then some sense of in making a move and making a decision, I'm good with that. That's what sits best with me. And that's not the same thing as that feels pleasant, or it doesn't have a whole range of other consequences for you. It can still it might still be a very painful decision to make. So it's not about, so you might still feel that pain, but there is some sense of being at peace that this was not, I haven't made this for some other kind of, I don't know, some other reason that serves some other part of me. It's something about being resonating with kind of the deepest aspect or core of your authenticity, whatever any of those words mean. And I'm linking that somehow to a clarity of access to something. In order to be able to know that feeling and to be able to have that feeling more frequently and more reliably, we have to be able to have some easing of defensive structures or tension. They probably go hand in hand. It's a clarity of access to something. And again, depending on how you think about things, it might be that it's a clarity of access to something within you or through you. But yeah, so that's where the resonance aspect comes from, and that there is a feeling that goes with that. There is a felt sense, and that is incredibly hard to put into words. But I see it, like I see, obviously, like for myself, I've experienced it, but more so than that, I can see how, I'm going to be very general, but I can see how for a lot of my clients, the ones that perhaps go deepest into clearing out some of this stuff, clearing out some of these defensive structures and being able to bring up and out some of these more unconscious motivations and emotions. Many of the clients who do that can then just sort of readily report how much easier it is, easier, not emotionally pleasant, but just easier it is to be able to take action in the world in ways that they don't then sit around and ruminate about or are tortured over or have a whole array of self-punitive consequences down the line that they never really anticipated, but, may have been motivating them in the first place. There's an ability to move and act in the world in a way that is less torturous.
Yeah.
Not the same saying that it's full of happiness and joy, can be very painful and difficult still. But there's not lots of sitting around and wondering and being sort of tortured over what to do. So that's one way of thinking about what I'm talking about. I'm sure there's other examples we could use rather than just being faced with a decision.
I
So
think
there's a few yeah to that, but I guess like kind of what I'm really interested in is well, A, what is that? What is that telling us more deeply? But B, like if you're following and you kind of have a sense of what I'm talking about, do you have words that you would put to what that feeling is, or that, because it's that's really hard to describe and people often ask about it, and it's
right. Well, I mean, sure I could come up with all kinds of words. But a few of the things that I was noticing in what you said uh, was first the word clarity, which was something that you eventually came up with. And the other word I was thinking about would be more like the result of this feeling or this resonance, but would be something like spontaneity.
yes,
But, you
and
know,
creativity. But that's creativity. That seems to
yeah,
be in there somewhere.
yeah. Well, what occurs to me to say is like, and I could, try to bring in some parallels from Feldenkrais work. But even if we didn't go into, the work we
Yeah.
do with clients, if we just think of how complex the world is right now, um, like how often do we have to decide something where there isn't really an obvious right answer, right? Like if I do this, it's going to work well, in terms of my relationship to this person, but it's going to cause me problems with this person. This is the better thing from the point of view of paying the rent, but in terms of like what's going to feel right in my, you know, in my soul, or however I say it, it's going to be another thing. And like I can't do all of these things at the same time. And then, as we talked about last time, there's all these layers of experience. There's the physical sensations in my body. There's the way that this situation reminds me of something, from several years ago. Maybe I'm even aware that that's a pattern and I'm trying to work on this pattern. And like all of this stuff comes in. And before I know it, I can't do anything because I'm like trying to analyze it all, which is definitely, it sounds like what you're talking about is an escape from like some sort of analysis paralysis where it's like, you know, even if later I wonder if I made the right move, in the moment I make a move and I'm clear I'm doing this, and that's not not a trivial thing, I think, in the modern world. I think it's a lot of the things that we do, and maybe we know why we do them. We still feel conflicted as we do them, and we're sort of like, well, I'm doing this because there's nothing better. And so to have that feeling of like all of me is all in on what I'm doing right now, that is something unique. And I think, I mean, I'm curious because you said you felt it. So I'm kind of curious to what was that like, but I that's how I'm hearing what you're saying, and it feels like something that probably everyone is looking for, and I'm sure most people have felt from time to time. But if we could understand it better and we could be like that more often, I think we'd be in a place of more ease, as you said.
Yeah, I agree. The spontaneity is so important. And I should yeah, I should clarify. So when I talk about like defensive structures, I am very much talking, I guess, from therapy speak. And so that is a large part of lots of people's, again, generalities. Defensive structures is the analysis paralysis. So it's the like just living up here in lots of thinking, and lots of those thoughts are functioning in order to try and do things, like they have their own motivations that aren't really conscious to us. So it might be a part of us is highly motivated to always keep someone at arm's length, no matter how much consciously we might really desire deeper connection. And we might, that actually there's something inside us that learned very early on that's very dangerous. And so people can only get so close, but it manifests in all sorts of different ways that aren't clear to us. And one of those ways could be, again, these are just examples. One of those ways could be that, yeah, every time we find ourselves in a relationship where it's starting to become to that point of closeness, that's starting to edge further and further, that this whole system turns on in our mind and starts wondering what the other, it could be all sorts of things, but wondering what's the other person now thinking of me, or they must be thinking these things of me. It could be that part of our brain starts to look for all the things that's wrong about a person in order to be able to discount them. Or it could just be, it just starts to overanalyze in order to create the disruption of connection. So
Mm.
long as this whirring in my head and I can't turn it off, I can no longer really be connected to this person. And also, whatever I sort of say or do with them won't reach that level of deepness or really show my true authenticity. It will all be tinged with overthinking and so that's its own kind of disturbance as well. So there is a way in which our thinking can not only paralyze us in terms of true action taking, like we just sit there unable to decide anything, but it can also disrupt our ability to connect. And that's its own kind of paralysis, I guess, because even though consciously we might be, that's all I want. I just want like I see this all the time in therapy. People come in. All I want is just to find a relation, like just a relationship where we can get close. But all these things always seem to happen every time I meet someone. And a lot of that can be coming from, this unconscious position of having learned probably very young, that getting too close to someone is associated with all sorts of different dangers to selfhood or to it could be a variety of things. So I won't go into all the things, but and it's often because it develops so young too that it becomes this very unconscious system. And we just experience, the part that sits above the ground. We just experience the the trees that are sprouting on the surface, so to speak, right? Which might be just, oh, my mind starts thinking all the time as opposed to realizing that the roots of that thinking come from a place that has motivations to keep us protected from getting too close. How did I get onto this? Am I doing it now? Maybe I'm doing it now. No, this came from talking about paralysis. I do have a tendency to go sideways very rapidly. So in terms of authentic resonance, so when I was talking about like defensive structures, yes, like I'm talking about things that would lead to actual paralysis. I'm also talking about things that lead to just like chronic disconnection and loneliness, even though people seemingly can make friends, can be in social groups, can have romantic relationships, but they suffer from this feeling inside of, but I'm so lonely still. Like I never really feel like I can be, like I get to be with another person, they really get to see me, or I never really feel, and they struggle to understand why. And then there's also a kind of another form of this defensiveness that I'm talking about is just internally the cutting off, the not being able to even become aware of what our emotional state is. So there's a sort of inward disconnection that takes place as well. And so the spontaneity that can come on the other side of that, I think, can show up in all sorts of different ways. So it can be, like the example we've been talking about of making a clear, like just making a decision, even though I agree with you, even though there's just really, it's very rare you have a situation where there's any clear path. But there's some ability to be able to take action and take it in a way that feels, it has an ease, a spontaneity that goes with it. But that is in terms of decision making, it's in terms of just being with another person. You think about even speech, like the decision for what's going to come out of my mouth next with this person, with a potential audience, and all these things. There's a kind that it's all related to that.
I had a thought about that, which was like, probably for any person, whether what we're talking about feels like an ongoing challenge or not, there are those people that we are more comfortable with, and there's those other people that we are less comfortable with. And I think, so if you think about the person where people say things like, oh, I could say anything to them. Well, what is that like, right? It's like there isn't probably as much of this sort of strategizing going on. And then if I'm with that person and I'm not strategizing and I'm speaking, I'm using language, in that sense, we tend to associate that with mind and thinking, but somehow what's coming out is maybe just what's in my mind. It's not my best attempt to have the best presentation, etc. And then, in that other situation where I really want you to like me, what I end up doing is trying to figure out how to get you like me, and then like right, and that I'm disconnecting from you as I do it. But it is kind of mysterious when I feel comfortable and I just say whatever it is that kind of comes out of my mouth, and maybe it works well, and we're developing rapport, and it's like, how did I do that? And I mean, one of the ideas that I've been sort of playing with a lot, and this is largely due to being around Bonita Roy, but she'll talk about the body is capable, right? Even if we're talking and we are expressing ideas, there's a way that it could be coming from the body. And she gives this example a lot, like you're driving your car and maybe you're worried about something, or maybe you're planning something, but you're thinking about something, and then you kind of look up and you just arrived home, and like, how did that happen? And it's like your body knows how to drive the car. Your body doesn't need you to talk to it and give it instructions, but we often have this model that, like, the executive lives up here and it's doing all this. But this sense of what you were calling authentic resonance, to me, I connect it to that idea of like the body is driving the car, or the body is even driving the car of this conversation. So I'm saying something, but somehow it's just coming out. And because that's happening, there's some like anxious work I might be doing if I'm strategizing and trying to get it right, which I'm somehow letting go of. And so I'm in this
Mm.
interaction and I'm saying things, but it just feels like, oh, whatever I end up saying, it'll probably be fine. And then there's something about the state of the body. There's some, I mean, we talked, I think, last time about in addition to all the words we're saying, we're communicating on a level below the words. But I
Yeah, yeah,
think
yeah.
maybe if I'm not strategizing, if I'm not so worried, part of what I'm communicating to you is like, hey, I'm comfortable. Maybe you can be comfortable too. Whereas if I'm like, okay, what does she want to hear me say? Let me say that. Then, like, regardless of the words, the energy you receive from me is already totally
Yes,
different. And then, of course, we're influencing each other back and forth, so it can cycle that way.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a lot in that. I do want to say, that example with driving the car, for what it's worth, I've heard that a few times, over my career. It's one that gets used a lot about, anyway, about muscle memory sort of as well, and just like, I've never experienced it. Isn't that funny? Like I've just everyone always uses that, and everyone else in the like audience is like, oh yeah, and I'm just like, oh. I'm I'm too focused on the driving. I mean I kind of have. I shouldn't say I've never experienced it. I've definitely had moments where like I definitely am thinking through other things while I'm driving. Um but yet somehow I'm always also aware of the driving. But anyway, that was an aside. Uh yeah, there's something, look,
That's right,
I think
though. You don't somehow find it difficult to drive because you're thinking of that other thing. It's like there's something that's so deep in you driving that car that, in a sense,
mm.
it does that part for you.
Maybe that's it. Maybe I'm just misunderstanding. I always think with that example, are they talking about like you get there and it's like time disappeared or something? Like you've forgotten. So actually I think the way that it has been presented to me before is that people can't even remember how that like the kind of the passage of time. I'm just like, well, I still remember the drive home, but I was mostly in my head thinking about stuff. But anyway, yes, so I think yeah, like words and language are so imperfect. And part of all of this is just the struggle to try and connect, and then also yeah, get ideas out there like objects and be able to wrestle with them together. We have to be able to some degree put them into language. So it's just sort of what we're working with. But the body as the instrument is how I sort of always think about like the body as the again, I think that's why I like the word resonance. It's the instrument through which we receive that signal, whatever it is. And there's all sorts of different kinds of signals. So there's obviously what we call emotions, again, housed in the body. I mean, housed, again, language, but felt, if we say, in the body. And then, other kinds of cues like hunger, is hunger an emotion? Like, there's obviously drives and instincts and other physiological sensations, like what people might refer to more as physical pain, hot, cold, these things. Um, and so I think there's something too when I was thinking about the word resonance, and I know very, very little about singing, but I know other people in my life who know some things about singing. And from the little I could understand about resonance and voice, is that again, it's about clarity. So it's about again easing tension in all the different parts of the pathway that lead to the voice coming out. But that also there's because of our unique physiology, because of everyone has a very different body, and the parts through which the voice is funneled and sort of created. Because they take on different shapes and forms and like at every different juncture, that leads to the different quality as well for every individual. So every individual has a different quality of what that, I don't know the terms, I don't know if that's tone, I don't know what that is, but it has a different quality as it comes out, when it is clear, when it does have that resonance.
Mhm.
And I just think as an analogy, like when I'm trying to think about, because that's obviously about resonance in terms of what comes out sort of like resonating with another person, like the kind of the reception of. Whereas I'm sort of thinking about, again, this might not work for some people in the way they think about things, but for me, I'm thinking about it being more like an internal connection into something that's available within us. It's that thing that's resonating, and what is our, I guess, conscious ability to be able to have connection into receiving that.
Yeah.
And so that comes from some, like, if we're going to put it in like really silly physical terms, some little center inside us that's like resonating out. Or whether that's more like, I've kind of been thinking a little bit more recently about, yeah, I'm gonna go sideways slightly. But there's this other idea, and I think I might have spoken to you about this in the voice note too. That's just been on my mind a lot lately, which is this Freudian term, the navel-of-the-dream. And so it relates specifically with Freud to the idea that in terms of dream analysis, that you can analyze a dream, like the content of a dream, only to a certain point, because ultimately there's the navel of the dream. There is ultimately the point with which it is connected to the unconscious that you just can't get at. And so I'm probably not expressing that well, but doing my best. And so I like that idea because it speaks to me too around the idea of how it is that sometimes we have to be so indirect in order to be able to describe what we're trying to describe, in order for the other person to understand what we're trying to get at. There are, and I think this conversation is a perfect example of that. If we could just say what authentic resonance was, we'd be done in like a minute. But this whole sort of circling around, and for me, almost the starting point is that accepting that there really are no clear words that I'd be able to like put in a sentence that I could give to you, that you go, oh, you could take that from me and be like, yes, I know what that is. That this is the necessary manner in which to like create the conditions that a person could resonate with whatever it is I'm trying to express. And
There's something that I came up with recently where I was looking at all kinds of long-term patterns and stuff. And the way it came to me was something like maybe there are no perfect words that I could say or I could hear someone else say that would sort of, give me that feeling of I've arrived and there's nothing more to worry about. But I mean, and that sounds obvious, but the reason it was landed as an insight is I think that I'm speaking for myself, but I'll hazard a guess that maybe others can relate. Like it's as if we think, if I just find the words for this thing. And something to me that's really interesting here is, I mean, especially we're meeting on Zoom from two sides of the planet, and so like words are the main vehicle available to us. And yet, I imagine that we're both speaking um, from feeling, right? And then I'm saying something, and I feel, oh, that's not quite right, and let me try and say it again. Oh, that feels closer. And so, what's really interesting to me about this idea is I think it's, I mean, I think it's like an idea as time has come is that it is those things that are so hard to express in words that are actually closer to something like quote unquote the truth, right? Like if I feel a sensation, in my body, I 100% feel that. Like I have total certainty about that feeling. When you ask me to describe it, now I'm stuck with language again. But it's like, um, Like, actually, something you said earlier that I was interested to go back to is you said, this might not feel good, but it could feel authentic. It could feel like it resonates. And it strikes me that there's this experience where we feel something, but what we then typically do is we do label it with some kind of words. And that's the moment where the thing that maybe doesn't feel so good can turn into something that just like, now I'm going to ruminate for the next 2 weeks versus, well, this doesn't feel good, but I think I know what it is, and I think I know what to do with it, and I act, and that's the thing that you're calling the authentic resonance.
Yes, I mean this is starting now to link in a little more clearly and specifically to sort of ISTDP principles, which is the kind of therapy I do. In that, so I think a nice example of what you're describing there for me anyway would be something like, so I lost my father a few years ago, and we were very close.
Mm.
And so obviously a very painful loss and, an array of feelings that go with it. And, there'll be times just in day-to-day life, everything's so busy, there's stuff going on. It could be anything, Seth. I don't know, it could be anything. But like I'll notice like something will happen and maybe I have an argument with my husband about something insignificant, or the kids do something, or something happens at work, and I can notice this kind of irritation and this like tension inside me. Um, and again, this is an example. It might not end up being about this. It could be about something else. But if I allow myself a moment to just stop, and sometimes you actually like just my life, I actually can't. But when I am able to allow myself a moment to just stop, and that might be at night when the kids are finally asleep and I'm absolutely exhausted and like lying in bed, or it could be like, or I might purposely stop and just like take a moment, step out of a room and take a moment. But if I really stop and allow myself to notice there's this thing in me, this like engine trying to just keep me moving and pushing me faster and lots of thinking and feeling very irritated. And if I try and step below that, turn that off, notice that as what I would call like one of these defensive maneuvers or something getting in the way of what's actually happening in my body, like what's actually going on. I consult my body. I don't then go in and consult my mind like more, if that makes sense. I try to really consult my body. And I know for people listening that's you probably hear that in a variety of ways, like listen to your body and all these things. And it can sound, I think for some people, depending where you're at, that can sound like just a kind of a throwaway, what does that mean? Like I consult my body, like I've got, so what? But once you sort of know how to do that a little more, I can get to a point where I just notice that actually underneath all of this, something somewhere has reminded me of my dad or something, right? Oh, there's just this is just a bit of the grief and the pain of realizing my dad's not here, right? And I can let it come up and I can have it. And it can be, and I might cry, and it can be intense. But there's a passage of feeling that, while on the one hand is obviously because it's pain and it's grief, is painful and grieving. But at the same time, because in my mind anyway, that is the root of it, right? That there is kind of no other thing underneath it. Like that is what I would say, like the core, the authentic bit that then branched off into all this other stuff. This is what I mean by almost the peace. Like I feel good. I feel good doesn't capture it. There's just a peacefulness that comes with it as well. So it's all at once painful, grief, but it's almost like a nourishment. It's like I connected
Sounds like
to.
when you say, "Oh, I'm realizing my father's not here," it's like that somehow matches the feeling better than the argument with the spouse or the funny thing at work, because maybe there's a sense of, okay, this little incident that just took place was unpleasant, but what I'm feeling, it's a mismatch, right? And so I want to find something that matches, but at the same time, what I mean, you
It's not
know,
quite that. It's not quite
yeah,
that, but please
yeah.
follow. I'll revise. Yeah. Do you
Well,
want me to?
so because I think, I mean, you lost your father, and and I'm sorry, very sorry to hear that, and people can understand that. That's authentic, right? You're not
Yeah.
making this up, and yet it seems like me saying the words, "Oh, it's about that," or that doesn't quite feel as deep as that sensation, as the something. So there is a match in terms like there's a way that we live. I mean, we live our lives in narrative, but I think the narrative is like closer up to the surface, and the other thing is deeper down.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think I did stumbling around. I didn't probably describe that in the correct maybe order, but sometimes it's hard with the chronology of events. But and there's also a simplification I'm kind of doing here all at once as well, because I'm trying not to bog it down too much in the unconscious conscious kind of language. But there's a manner in which I'm able to stop and notice, like consciously what's going on. I'm just like really irritated, right? And then the mind starts with why, probably all the reasons why I am. And but then I guess I try to notice the irritation and wonder what's under that.
Mhm.
And this comes from experience, from sort of knowing that that's probably something defensive or secondary, right? Like I wonder if there's actually something under that. And it's actually the inquiry into the body, into the emotion that might be under that, where I come in contact with what I guess I would call painful feeling, grieving feeling. Like there's just a grief. There's a way now I know, oh, that's grief, right? Um, and so it's more that I become in contact with that first before I ever get to a thought of, oh, I just miss my dad, and then that comes. So it's more that comes up, that I get in contact with that. And in my and sometimes I don't know why it is. So I use the example of my father because it's just kind of a clear-cut one, like you say, that most people would have some version of being able to relate to. And sometimes I don't actually know why. I get in contact with a feeling I don't really know what it's about. I still let it come up and out. It still feels just as good. It doesn't really need the labeling. I think I probably just added that part in because, again, it might help with the more general understanding of what I'm talking about. But in that sort of coming up, there is something about that set of feelings, which at the same time, in that example, would come probably with like some sort of image of my dad. And then there's sort of it's not really cognitive, but if I have to put words to it, it is a bit like something in me goes, it's my dad. Like I miss my dad. Like but it's not really with words. Um,
Well, one
but
thing that
you
you
don't need
mentioned
that
was
component. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you mentioned sometimes you would just cry, and
Yeah.
like I know what it feels like just before I cry. And there's often, I mean, I don't know if this is some
Mhm.
universal, but in my case, no matter how like just natural it is to cry, there's almost like a resistance to crying that always comes before. And then there's the letting go of that resistance. And then there's crying, but then there's something that's cleared by that. And that has a sense too for me of authenticity. It's like whatever it is that I need to cry about, if there is a thing that it's about, or maybe I don't know, but there is that need, like my body wants to do that, and then my body finally does the thing it wants to do, and then it's like
Mhm.
then
Yeah.
there's something that's really
And
clear.
so, yes, and so I like from maybe an ISTDP perspective, what we're potentially talking about here is that just that tension or that resistance that comes online to stop the crying once you notice that consciously, oh, I might cry, right? That would be like the defensive structures, and then your ability to be able to notice that, but relinquish it and decide that this other part of you wants to come up and to experience that, to face that. Um, that sounds like that feeling, whatever it is, has sort of more of a primary quality. And what I mean by that is in having it, through having it, the anxiety goes away. I think that's sort of what you're describing on the other side of it. You know, that this is kind of like when we talk about a good cry, as opposed to like a weepy kind of cry that just goes on forever and you never feel better.
Right.
And it may be actually signaling something to someone else to come and, you know, like there's all sorts of other ways we can cry. But when you have that cry where I think you're spot on, that you can almost notice the part of you that wants to stop that. I don't want to do that, and you just let it happen. It's so, for many people, it can come with that, the tension goes away, the anxiety drops because now you've just experienced the feeling, and the tension, the various kinds of resistance that are trying to stop you from doing it. That's precisely why they're there. They're trying to stop you from experiencing it because they're like, oh, that might be bad, that might be, but once you allow it to come up and out, that tension doesn't need to be there anymore because you've experienced it and you've realized that the bad thing didn't happen. This maybe is now getting cloudy, but it's because what I'm trying to say is I think that signal you're talking about, that sort of on the other side of it, like that is usually, again, everything's general, but usually a sign that you're in touch, that whatever feeling came up there had some more of a primary sort of
Yeah.
more of an authentic place as opposed to being defensive. Because you can also have defensive feelings. You can have other feelings that mask the other feeling that sits underneath it. Which, that thing like irritation sometimes is a good one.
Right. Well, if I
You
try
know?
to think of all the reasons not to cry, they're all probably defenses. Like, I don't want you to see me cry, or people who cry are like this and I'm not like that, or whatever. Um, and they're all, so they all feel like they would be mental kind of things. Whereas, I mean, just like my body also tells me when it's time to, visit the bathroom, like
Yeah.
my body tells me it's time to cry. And it's like, it,
Yeah,
so
imagine if we did that with our signals about going to the bathroom. Just like, yeah, like, oh, no, I just need to push through that. I just can't, don't do it. Just don't give in.
Well, it's funny because on some level, we do that all the time, and we're all probably glad that we know how to do that,
Well,
wait till
to
the
an
appropriate
extent.
moment.
If it's
But
waiting for an appropriate moment, though, see, that's the difference. If it's just a global strategy, if this should never happen, I should always be. And I agree with the waiting for a moment. Well, we should have choice about where and when we do these things
right,
because it is
right,
easy to do all that to
right.
someone.
But
But
but the thing that I was noticing also about, like, let's say I have, several reasons why I think I shouldn't cry, and it's literally a concept. And then, I let go of those and I cry, like, to the degree that I do notice what I'm doing, I am letting go of the reasons, I'm letting go of the stories. Or maybe there's even a part of me that goes, well, I guess I am that person. Or, uh-oh, I guess you are going to see me crying now. But, like, even if I don't like those things, I stop making those the driver of my behavior, and I allow something that I wasn't willing to allow. And it kind of takes me back to earlier when we were talking about how even in speech there might be a way that I'm just letting it happen. And that too is like, because if I'm really sure that, there is a right thing to say, and if I say the wrong thing, that could be problematic for me, or bad things could happen, then it's kind of a leap of faith for me to just say, oh, well, let me just see what comes out. Let me just try to be more natural. Like, I could have the ideal of being natural, of being spontaneous, but if I'm not quite there because I'm not really feeling it, to allow myself to get there is to just risk that maybe this is a big mistake, but I'm just going to let it happen. So there's something
yeah,
about that. And of course we can, we can go into pathological behavior where we think we're in the flow, and what we're doing is allowing momentum to take over, and later we're like, wow, I wish I, you know too far in the other direction. But there is a sweet spot here that we're talking about.
like me and my sideways stories. But yeah, no. I think I think you're, being able to link again, if we stick with this example of noticing the welling up of a desire to cry, And then that resistance that comes online says, oh no, don't do that. And especially don't do that here because there's a person here and I wouldn't want them to see me do that. I think that in and of itself, that thought process of I wouldn't want this person here to see me do that, especially if the person there is someone that you actually like you see well. And that can often be an indicator that the thing, like these tears that are welling up, are probably very core and primary. Because to show that, because the resistance is about, again, very general, the resistance can be about, if I do that in front of this person, they will see something very real about me. Like that will be very vulnerable. That will be very like emotionally intimate. And again, even though consciously we might think, that's what I want. I just want like everyone to get like as close to me, like especially people I like to be able to get as close to me and see the real me underneath. But we can think that that's what's driving us, but often underneath there's this other drive that's come about from early life, of varying degrees for people, but people can only get so close to me because otherwise bad things could happen. And so showing something so vulnerable, like tears, which would be, which don't happen every day, if it truly is related to something very authentic inside, it would make sense that this defensive part would wake up and would be saying, no, don't do that here with this person. Don't do that here, because they could think things about you. What might they think about you? And then that might, because the thinking things about you would probably then lead to the relationship coming to an end. It would disrupt the connection. And I want to keep the connection. I want the person to think well of me. I want to keep this how it is. I don't want to make it bad or worse. And so there are these two, it oftentimes comes down to the fact that there are these two competing drives going on for people. On the one hand, this desire to be authentic, right? And so so these feelings, let them come up and out, and people will think what they think about me, versus I don't want people to just think what they think about me. I want to be able to manage that to some degree. Like, I'm so, are you willing to be as authentic as possible? Whatever that means about what the people around you think about you.
Mm-hmm.
See, so if that means that if I just let it come up and out here, and it's true, my worst case worry is true, that the person in front of me who I care about then thinks I'm a weirdo or weak or doesn't want anything to do with me. Am I okay with that? Does my desire for authenticity trump my desire for connection? Like there's some kind of compromise here between how much am I willing to be authentic in the service of that in and of itself being an
Right.
important goal for me, versus how much though am I willing to risk that getting in the way of connection, because we need both.
Right.
Um,
Well, I
so
mentioned that a lot of the things that we carry with us from a young age are the result of a moment of pure authenticity that we were punished for.
yeah, yeah,
Right? Like the little kid, who does
yeah.
what feels natural because they're a kid and they're not playing by the same rules as the adults in the room. And then the adult says, don't you ever do that again. And it's like I have a choice to be authentic and do what feels fun right now, or laugh at something that just seemed funny, but apparently I'm not supposed to laugh, versus I'm okay or I'm not okay. And then there's this double bind. And then what you're talking about is maybe years later I can feel that authentic, spontaneous thing arising. And then maybe I imagine this might be what happens in the sessions when you're with a client, is I can actually identify there is an authentic impulse and there is a defense, but we can actually see both of them. And then it becomes like, okay, this feels really risky, but I'm gonna
Then
actually
we can talk
step
about
past.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, be able to identify both things and sort of pass them out first. Because for people, often it's all just one big, you know,
yeah,
what's the word it's got? One big thing, just one
yeah,
big ball of experience. And so really breaking that down for a person to realize that, exactly like you say, like you notice as you get that sensation behind your eyes, there's also this thing in you that tries to push it back down again. And then you notice there's a series of thoughts that go with that. And then, you know, if we explore this as a pattern, do you see how this might relate to, you know, all these different relationships in your life where you can say outwardly, consciously, my desire is just to like get close to people and let them see me. And I just don't know why it's not happening. It's like, well,
Right.
you know, even just a tiny little example, something in you won't even let you cry in front of your, you know, your close friend or, you know, so I wonder what that might tell us more broadly about whatever compromise is being made inside you at some level about what matters more, right? What matters more and what level of risk you're willing to take.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work around that. The the primary, I'm trying to trace back a little. So to sort of like, so going back, so I think with my dad, I think we finished that off. What did we say? The pain. Oh yeah. So then it's more like maybe like an image of him or something. And then I think it's more so after the fact that I'm sort of putting together a narrative of, well, that pain and grief is likely about him. That's what was flashing through my mind as I was crying, you know. But whatever it was, whether or not that is real, is lesser important than the experiencing of that feeling, that allowing that process in my body to play out unhindered. On the other side of that, there is I think ease is probably the best word. But again, I don't want ease to be confused with I'm joyful. You know, there's still a somberness, but there is also kind of a hope is, yeah, like it feels, I'm like things are almost like as they should be, or this sounds like I'm wrapping a story around it. I'm just trying to put words to what the feeling state is, more so than this is what I'm actually thinking in words.
Yeah.
It's like I'm more present and I'm more just without tension in the present.
Mm-hmm.
And that in and of itself just affords you so much more
Right.
clarity, possibility, relief, like yeah, and then ability, I guess, to then yes, to be spontaneous and but that I brought up that example because I was trying to illustrate something and I'm trying to trace it back. So that would be more like maybe like what I would call like a primary allowing. So first of all, there's the working with people to get to a place where even understanding that emotions can actually, yeah, this links, now I remember, this links to something you were saying. That emotions, our body as instrument can actually help us to understand or to be in contact with things that are outside the reach of our thinking mind day to day. They can get us into a place where we can connect to that. And then there's layers even with that, because sometimes we think we're doing that with an emotion, but actually that emotion is functioning as a defense. And if we get too stuck on that emotion and we only stay there, sometimes that can eclipse something deeper. And so that's where the kind of therapy I do is really helpful for people. It's a working through that process to try and get more to the ground level, if we call it that. And in doing that, you also, through the process of doing that, you also just happen to clear out a lot of that access point. So it's easier for those primary emotions to be coming up now day to day, as opposed to all this other stuff that sits on top. Easier, not perfect, because we're still obviously just naturally going to be defended creatures to some degree. But beyond that, so that is like a type of resonance, I agree, but that's sort of maybe more like what I would call like an emotional resonance. But beyond that, I think there's something about going through that whole process that can then lead to a different kind of feeling state. Maybe it is the thing that I'm trying to describe on the other side of a good cry. It's just a kind of a connecting into, because if you think about, I like to go back to the decision making because I think this illustrates it. If you think about when you make a decision, it's not necessarily that, it doesn't necessarily come with an emotional state. Like there might be incidental emotions because imagining one scenario brings up pain or nervousness, or like there might be that, but the actual deciding, like I don't know, on the other side of the deciding, or in the moment of the trying to figure out what you're going to do, there's some kind of feeling state you can access that well, at least for me and the thing I'm trying to describe that I've heard from others, that allows you in that moment to be like, yeah, that's good. That's an alignment. Like,
Mhm.
and that's, I'm kind of good and solid with that, even if it ends up, lots of other things happen that I never could see happening, or even if this means that actually lots of people around me are not going to be okay with me. Inside, I'm solid. Like
Yeah.
I'm I'm rested in it. There's that feeling state is kind of what I'm trying to put the authentic resonance words to. Um,
Well, one thing that
because
comes to mind is like, so we've used these examples of, something comes up and then there's resistance, and I let go of the resistance, and then something resonates. And then I just imagine, what if I repeat that so many times that I start to just see the resistance a mile off? And then there's just like, so we could describe a sort of successful, we made our way through the maze and came out the other side. But what happens for the person who's just like becomes a total expert at any maze that comes up? I don't. One thing that comes to mind. Do you know about Byron Katie and the work of Byron Katie? So
no.
I've read a couple of her books, but she's really interesting. She's this woman who was just like in a terrible place, like locked herself in her room, screaming at her kids all the time. And she's eventually like,
Like recent time, or like
well, so the story goes back to, I think it's 1986, but basically she
okay.
had like an awakening type of experience. She just woke up one day, and I think she was in a halfway house at this point, you know, but the way she describes it is, I realized that all of my suffering was coming from my thinking. And she basically says, I stopped believing my thoughts. And then she developed this thing that she calls the work. And it's 4 questions. And she'll sit with someone, and the person will say, like, I'm mad at my sister because she doesn't appreciate me or whatever. And she'll say, is that true? And the person will say, yes, it's true. And then she'll say, can you absolutely know that that's true? And then there might be a little doubt, like, okay. And then the third question is, when you think that thought, my sister doesn't, da da da, how do you react? How do you feel when you think that thought? And then the fourth question is, who would you be without that thought? And then she has a turnaround. So if my sister doesn't appreciate me, then I'm supposed to say, I don't appreciate my sister, and I'm supposed to explore how that's true. Or my sister does appreciate me, and explore how that's true. And it's sort of like, so anyway, this
Yeah.
is her whole process. And she does it with people over and over. And so she gives you worksheets, and you write out all the judgments you have. It's called the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet. But what I noticed about it is, so I played with this, and I was like, this is pretty cool, and it's pretty simple. But
Mm,
what happens with me sometimes now is to just have a thought, and I don't go through the whole process, but I just pause and I sort of say, is that real? Is that true? And I don't even necessarily answer the questions, but I just, because how often do we just take a thought that appears in my mind as if God has spoken? This is the truth, as opposed to, this is a thought in my head right now. And so what's really interesting to me is like, so here's the other thing about Byron Katie. So she looks like this person who's just kind of like in this totally different state than anyone else, but she says things like, I don't make decisions anymore. I just get really fascinated and curious to see what it is that I will do. And then she
yeah.
talks about how, I'm not doing irrational things. I'm not like, you know, although she does certain things that people find astounding, but she's always in this state of joy and all of this stuff. So, but it connects to some of what we're talking about, because just this sense of like, there just is, at least to hear about it, it sounds like as if she lives with just like no tension or friction or anything. And it's almost as if she's just watching herself, curious to see, what will I do next?
Mm. That's interesting on many, many levels. There is almost a way, like I look back on sort of a lot of like trajectory in my life, and just kind of broadly speaking, there's a way some of that sort of fits with how I would describe I've just found myself. Like that's how I talk about it a lot with people. So, like lots of times, like people, oh, how did you decide what you wanted to do? And like, and then you pivoted kind of in your career, and why did you do that? And what was your, I don't know. Like none of it was like I shouldn't say like none of it was planned. I obviously had to like sign up to certain things, and but like there was no grand planning. There was no I just, and maybe this is going back to the authentic resonance. I just kind of have this, oh, now's the time to do that. I don't know how to describe that. It's just a bit like, huh. Like there's kind of a waiting sometimes. Like I'll be aware of something in the back of my head that's a possibility. And I'll be like, oh, I might want to do that at some point. That interests me. And then I just sort of, but there's sometimes for some things I start to sort of wrestle with, oh, but I want to do it now. How am I gonna? But in a larger sense, there are times where I'm just like, oh, it's okay, cool. So kind of stored somewhere there. And then there's just this, I don't know, this kind of ease with which at a particular time in my life, it kind of pops back up again, and I go, yeah, I'm going to do that now. I don't know how to describe it. And then but those things, those moments are kind of the big moments, I guess, if you have to look back on it in that way, that have led me down like just the trajectory I've happened to follow. Um, they don't, I don't kind of take ownership for it. It just feels to me like that I am allowing access of something else
Yeah.
kind of in that place.
Yeah.
Um, and that
Is that sense of allowing access, is that kind of why you trust it? You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. It must be. Again, I can't give you a clear answer. Like I want to say yes, because that
Right. Well,
sounds
the question
right.
why is already a very analytical kind of a question. So,
Right, but this is where, but I've been thinking so much about it lately, Seth, and I can't really put any words to. And it all just sounds a bit airy-fairy and non-rigorous, and but I think so. There's some quality to it. It's very calm, but at the same time has like I should, like when I say calm again, I don't mean it doesn't have any force to it, but it's not like forceful in like a painful, aggressive way or something, or like an anxious way. It's lacking anxiety, but it's got a momentum to it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do that now, and just sort of
right,
do it. And again, not
right.
to say that when they're doing it, there's not struggles along the way, and of course there is, but the actual decision to engage in the thing and to take the step. I'll say yes to, oh, okay, I don't know, just many, many points in my life. And they end up sort of being the things that if I had to sit back now and like write out a chronology of things in my career, like each of the kind of bits and stages of that chronology that I would put down on paper, the movement or the starting point of each of those stages have all been defined by this thing. Like it's
Yeah,
not, I'm,
yeah,
it's that's what, does that make sense?
yeah.
Um,
Well,
which I
when you put it like that, I don't know if this fits exactly, but I could imagine that those were moments where you were particularly courageous, right? Because they were momentous decisions. And it's like, what do I do? Do I, follow this career path or that career path? Well, it's not a small decision. But in the end, I don't get to follow both career paths and compare. Like there's only one way my body can move at a time. So, I mean, I
yeah,
love the word resonance because I'm all about musical metaphors, like musicality of being. That's my thing, right?
of
Um,
course.
and at the same time, it strikes me like if I try to think, well, okay, if I don't use that metaphor, which I'm so comfortable with, it's like, well, is it the same thing if you're cooking and you decide, oh, I think I want to add a little more spice, or so and so, has a birthday. Oh, that's what I'll get them as a present. And
Yeah.
it's like so
Comes
there's
to you.
a creativity to it. Like I could have made any decision out of all the infinite. I pick this, and something in me says yes.
Yeah, the surety, the kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
steadiness of, yeah,
Right.
yes.
And I'm with you that if we could somehow understand how that works, well,
Yes,
Put it in a
yes.
bottle and we'll sell it. And, but yeah, no, I can understand why, you're coming
The
back again and again. And I think it does feel like, I mean, we've used all kinds of words in this conversation, but it's like I have a sense that we're both feeling the same thing. I get that sense that, and sometimes I like that game where it's like, oh, warmer, colder, but there is that sense, and then it's almost as if that sense comes all the way together in those moments that you're talking about in your trajectory where you made those big decisions.
That's the magic of it, isn't it? Like it's I have the same sense that I can tell through this conversation that the thing that I'm trying to paint a picture of for you, you're kind of understanding, and like there's a that we're understand like that, yeah, that we're both experiencing the same thing that we're trying to describe back to each other. And that, in my mind at least, what makes that possible, that shared resonance, right? Is is that we could take the time to sit here and just throw all these words out in an attempt to talk about something that we know is going to be so hard to even describe with words. That is courageous too. So that goes back to the courage. I think I'm really glad you brought up courage,
Well,
because
I feel in the last minute or two, I feel freer just by virtue of us sort of agreeing that we seem to be talking about the same thing, even though it's like that phrase we use, you know what I mean.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it's like, I don't know. I mean, if we're on Zoom, but if we were in the same room and if we were working on some particular thing, like this is the sense of, oh, I can collaborate with you, right? Like if I don't know if I mean that's what we're doing here. There's a sense of, and that's interesting because I can't quite explain to you what I'm tuning into. I don't know if we fully, but there is this sense of, oh yeah, that.
Yes, yes, and it is related again to that, like something to do with like a an ease. I don't want to say comfort necessarily, but yeah, that easing of tension, that easing of holding kind of rigidly oneself, whether that's just cognitively in your body, however it is, just that that sigh
Well,
of
that's
like,
what I just felt. Like I can't explain to you or anyone listening why I'm sure that we're talking about the same thing now. But for myself, I had whatever it was that I needed to decide that. And that, I mean, it wasn't, in that sense, it wasn't a decision. It was more like a realization, but it feels more easeful being in that space because, and now I feel, I mean, to give a concrete example, I don't feel as worried that I'm going to find the right words anymore because there's this sense of, it's like the you know what I mean thing.
but we've got the shared mission, kind of like the idea. Yeah, I agree with you. I really love the phrase, and you've used it a couple of times, and I'm finding myself using it all the time now by chance. You just said it before when you were talking about resonance, and you said, but I want to take it out of, the parlance of kind of musicality for people that, and then you said, it strikes me that, and I
Uh,
just love that phrase, it strikes me. Like I just always think of like, like, and like frequency and like, like striking something and kind of
yeah,
it's got its own musicality to it. It's a really,
right,
and things would strike us again,
right,
like that rather than we are coming up with it,
right.
something strikes us. And I just think that's it's really beautiful language um that yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that, but I just wanted to throw that in there that I noticed you use it. And I don't know
Yeah,
if you've thought about that phrase before.
it strikes me. Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, I know I've been using that phrase for years, not necessarily always with this kind of quality. Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
it
it
is
might
it is like the
be.
striking of a bell or something. And what I would say also is like, so if I did go to the musical metaphor, and I've had both versions of this experience, if I'm making music with other people, but I'm the one who can't play in tune, then I feel really like, you know, I feel outside, right? Then if I feel like we're all making beautiful music together, that's a feeling of belonging, right? And I mean, I think that there's something here that we're doing. So we could have this long conversation and we could get to this point of kind of concluding, oh man, I don't know what she's talking about. And we spent all this time, and that would be this feeling of like, oh, like even if I decided, well, you're a really great person, I want to talk to you again, I'd probably have this inner sense of like failure and like, you know, and we can have those conversations because it's not like every time you're with a person that you have a good relationship with, everything feels like resonance all the time. But what does feel good is this sense of like, so we're trying to name a feeling, but in terms of this conversation, it's like, oh, okay, so we can do this together. And potentially that means we can do it again. And potentially, like if I'm worried that I don't have a bunch of friends, but with this person, it seems to be going well. And then maybe I'll get to be their friend next week too. All of this like settles my nervous system. And then, the more we settle and the less noise there is, that's when I can start to feel something like joy potentially. And I can feel that. And so I wanted to turn this around though back to you because
Really briefly, because I'll lose it, and then
yeah,
please,
yeah.
to me that really captures like trust, like the establishment of trust, and then that there's relational continuity here, right? And
Right,
then that opens me up to be able to, even if I did something that that person didn't like, that wouldn't be enough to disrupt the rest of the, like, I have this trust it will continue anyway, which is where the
right.
spontaneity can come. Yes, go, please. What were you
Yeah,
gonna?
well, on that piece, if I trust you, I can be a little more spontaneous. I actually can risk a little more to say the thing that won't resonate with you because I trust the container. But my question for you is, so now we're talking about you and I, and we're using this example of the two of us talking. But earlier, when you were speaking about something happens in the middle of my workday and I step aside and then I feel something deeper and then I find this authentic resonance, I'm wondering if this scenario that we're using you and I to describe, it can happen between myself and me as well.
Yes.
Like, but this same dynamic of trust, belonging. Oh, it's okay if I make a mistake. I can be more spontaneous. Is that part of what it is, even when it's just you, no one else is present, but you're having a feeling like that? Do those words work in there as well?
Yeah, I think so. Again, it's very hard to put into language, but this parallel between what we are describing here, which is more like that relational resonance or connection,
Yeah.
I'm drawing it back to what I'm trying to call authentic, because it's intrapsychic. It's like relationship with self. So I
Yeah.
agree with you. I think turning it back around and is that essentially the same process that goes on within me and my relationship to myself and to my emotions and to everything, right? All the components. So it's my relationship to my thinking mind, because that's still one aspect of me, my experience, my internal experience. And you spoke about that when you were talking about, I've forgotten the name of the person, but that person's work with the 4 steps.
Byron Katie. Yeah.
And when you were talking about that work, like what I was hearing described there, just in a very kind of general sense, was a bit like a CBT kind of protocol, but it was maybe more from a position of something like a mindfulness-based, like acceptance and commitment therapy. I think what you were describing is that you come to change your relationship to your thoughts, so that now thoughts you can create some distance from your thinking mind and just see thoughts as like one stream of something that happens inside you, that you don't have to take seriously. You don't have to follow their commands. Like, they can just be there. I think that's what you were describing. It's sort of where you get to is like, now you just might notice a thought, and rather than having to sort of go through these explicit steps to kind of remind yourself of that and remind yourself that thoughts might have their own motivations, and like you can just say, it's just kind of some words in my head coming from some motivated place, and step aside from them and then relate back into something else within you that might guide you. So the way we relate to our thoughts, the way we relate to our emotions, all of this is really all I do in my therapy approach. It's not really relational much at all. It's trying to really keep the focus firmly on what is your relationship to your internal experience, and how's that getting in the way of your goals. And usually people's goals are relational, so then it reverts back to that,
Right.
well, when all this happens inside you, that's what gets in the way of all these things with your partner. It's not necessarily that your partner does X, Y, and Z. It's what happens inside you when they do those things that you're having trouble resolving, understanding, acting on in a way that is useful to you and your goals. And so when you talk about, turning around what we're experiencing here together, and sort of seeing if that would work in terms of what I'm trying to describe inwardly, I mean, my first thought would be yes, because I see those two things as being intimately linked. My relationship to again, I'm going to go back to the word core, but for other people, whatever it is, this thing that we're talking about that would be the authentic guide, whether that is a core or something else outside us, my relationship to that, I think most people's relationship to that is just highly clouded, and obfuscated, and it's not easy to get to. And so what I'm trying to describe is a moment where someone has clear access to it, and there's a felt sense that goes with that, which might happen once for a person in their life, might be for some people happening every day. Like whatever it is, it's whatever that felt sense is. That yes, trust, I think, is a beautiful word for that, because that's what I think I mean by like solid, like assured isn't quite right, but trust. I just trust it. I just trust that this move I'm making is, again, I don't like, I wanted to just say there is just the move I need to make here, or the move I truly want to make here, or the move that is needed here by me. Again, depending where you think this will is coming from, like a you or a larger thing. Like this is where I'm supposed to be going right now.
Yeah.
But without any of that language. And that, I think, is the key. And you've helped me to really clarify that in this conversation, is that it's really important to state that it doesn't mean that that language comes up in your mind. Because I
Right.
think people get confused with that. Like if I talk to myself and tell myself, this is the move I really need to
Right.
make in service of the universe. Like if I say all these things to myself, like, I'm good, I'm on the, like, it's not a
Yeah.
positive mantra. I'm
Right.
just putting words to something that I imagine if it had a microphone and had to speak English would say, but it's
Yeah.
not saying that inside me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
there's one thing you might see if it resonates, right? One of the things we've sort of zeroed in here is trust. And
Yes.
I it makes sense to me. If I trust, I don't doubt, I don't second guess. And that's all the things that we kind of talked about as the hesitation or the resistance, right? If that's not there,
Mm.
if if I'm in the ice cream shop and they have my favorite flavor of ice cream, I just say, give me that one, and it's just like, I know there is no need for discussion. But one of the ways that I understand trust in terms of embodiment is I trust the ground, right? Every time I take a step, I don't think about it. I just trust that the earth is going to be there and that it's not going to crumble under my feet, right?
I love that. Yeah.
And if I'm walking on ice, or if it's
Yeah. Yeah.
slippery, that's not trust. That's like I have to, as we say, watch my step, right? But like
That's me.
stepping shouldn't require watching. It should just be stepping, right? And so it's just like I just so and I just, the reason I especially wanted to say that is you keep talking about I want to go down to something like core. And so anyway, I wanted to bring that in, like
No, I
ground,
love I
the
love that. I'm just
physical
thinking
ground.
about the image of me with a snowboard when I was trying to move.
Ah,
And never experienced anything like it. I'll just never forget that feeling. Like, what? Like I can't move my legs independently. It was very
you were
frightening. And
like,
I've put it,
this is not authentic resonance.
that was the opposite of trust. I didn't know what that was. It was so off-putting, and I just was not expecting how off-putting that was going to be for me. Um,
But it's like
that's
it's that moment when I'm walking over ice and then I step onto the clear, crisp, and it's almost like I get a lift, right? Like the footing is clear now, and it happens in an instant, and it's not necessarily a thought. It's like is that moment of it's like a bodily clarity. It's like a it because it can happen that way in an instant. It's like the previous step, I was anxious, I was worried about falling, and then my foot hits solid ground, and it's like something lets go throughout my whole system.
it is. It's like the ground. It can I know it can bear my weight. And I
Yeah,
think it's like that in a relationship. I've established enough here now that there's an increased confidence that you could bear the weight of my authentic presence. If it were to come up, if I were to cry, if I like, right, if I was upset with you and I wanted to express that to you, in a nice way, but like if I wanted to share that with you in service of trying to work through something, and
right,
um,
right,
I can trust that you could hold that, right? I
right.
think that's kind of and that's the same with the ground, isn't it? Because on the ice and wherever you're like, oh, I'm not quite sure if this is going to hold my weight. Like I'm not, well, it's also the falling over with the slipping. But yeah, once you get back onto that ground where you know it's got you and you can put all your weight on it, yeah, this is wonderful. I love it when these things kind of all come together. I loved that I hadn't heard that before, Seth, that idea of trusting the ground. I've never thought about it in those terms. That's really powerful.
Well, it also
It's
occurs to me that you could have a client who doesn't totally trust themselves, but they trust you. And now I'm going to cry in front of Aspasia, and I think I trust her. And then I cried in front of you, and the world didn't end. And that makes it easier for me to maybe trust myself so that the next time I'm with someone else, I don't actually have, they don't have to be someone who I know can hold space, because it's okay for me to just be sad or be angry or whatever. Like I can trust the other person, but I'm also trusting myself to, if the other person is different, like there's a way that I've decided that I'm
yeah,
trusting myself, and and then if I trust you, I can trust myself more easily. But it's like because you're very trustworthy, it's like
mhm.
level one for me to trust myself, and then I'm with the person who's a little less trustworthy, but now I learned with you how to trust myself, and I'm going to try it out in a more prickly situation where I don't know what they're going to do, but
I
yeah.
love it. I'm just putting it as you speak. I'm putting it into sort of more ISTDP, like psychoanalytic terms. I'm trying to anyway in my head. I think it's something like um in the therapy room for the person who doesn't yet trust themselves, that they can hold themselves internally in that way, right? Because there are those two levels. There are going to be, I can have all this inside myself, but I'm still going to be in relationship with people every day where I'm like, I'm not showing them that part of me, but it's a conscious choice. It's like, oh, I'm not,
Yep.
it's not coming from a place of I do that with everyone because I can't even get access to it, right? But for the person, yeah, who's in the therapy room, I think that you're describing that can't do that internally for themselves, that are not trusting their own ability to hold their own internal weight. Then it's kind of this more graded style in therapy with me, where yes, like the relationship and having me there to be someone who might be able to help start to hold the ground for them as they start to softly explore. Starts to build up an ability internally for them to do that. But there's also something here around that unconscious conscious piece, which is that the decision gets made somewhere, right? And this is the idea. The decision gets made somewhere in the psyche. These things, this set of feelings, if we say, cannot come into like whatever it is, the psychic center decides we do not trust our ability to have these consciously in relationships with people. And so they will get cut off and put over here, and you just won't experience this. We're just not going to experience them consciously. And so part of what I see then the role of the therapy to be is that we are gradually starting to shift the balance internally, which I'm trying to provide a context and a vehicle and a relationship within which whatever that psychic center is inside, it makes a new determination. It starts to slowly make a new determination. Well, actually now some of these things, maybe now actually I can trust that I'm able to look at those, right? So it starts to, and so this, a lot of this therapy is about bringing unconscious stuff into consciousness for the person. We look at it together. We allow the exploration of it together. It's often all this new stuff, and they're like, so it's new for them. But through being able to do it, the learning that takes place, one hopes, is that inwardly they realize, oh, I can hold this. For whatever reason that got cut off when I was 3 years old or 8 years old or whatever, look at me now, 30 or whatever. I can hold this now. And actually, the decision wherever to have that sit over here has been really interfering with my life. It's led to all sorts of suffering.
Yeah.
Not only can I trust that I can hold it, but it can be of value to me. Now I get closer to me, to me as a whole, like this kind of authentic wholeness as
Right.
well. I think this core is also wrapped up with something about wholeness.
Yeah. Well, it strikes me when you say, I can hold this, that could be very specific. It could be, the thing that I brought up at the beginning of our therapy session today. Now I realize I can hold that thing. But it strikes me there could be another level where it's more like whatever comes up,
Yeah,
I can hold it.
right.
Right. And
That's
that
right.
would be a deeper trust. And what I like about it is it feels to me more like the way I trust the earth not to crumble under my feet. That it doesn't really require anything in terms of justification. It doesn't really even feel like psyche. It's more like my body can process this, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just the understanding, and that actually is part of also what comes on the other side of what I would call a really effective therapy process, is that a person obviously no longer needs the therapist. And it's just very clear. It's not kind of wishy-washy and I could come back for like it's just clear because they exactly like you said, they now just have a trust in themselves that stuff's gonna like whatever comes my way, I can trust that I'll figure it out. Like I'll be like I'll know what to do. Bad words again, but like I'll be all right. Like there's not this fear that I will crumble or this fear, right? And yeah, trusting in my ability. I guess it's like the ground metaphor that because obviously, and I think this is part and parcel of the world we live in. Obviously, there is going to be, devastation and loss and all the stuff happening outside of our control constantly around us that we can't predict. So none of this is about how can I live a safe little life where I can predict everything. It's the being okay with I can't predict everything around me, but I'm solid in my relationship inside. And I think that is reliant on this clarity of channels or whatever we call it. That this sense that I have a clear connection. And again, it might not be all the time, but I have enough instances of being able to get a clear connection with something that feels very authentic, core-like,
Yeah.
guiding, trust that I can trust it
Right.
to nudge me in the right place, to help me, to be with me. That I have enough access to that. That is what allows me to feel like shit's going to happen in life, and it's going to feel all sorts of hard things, and it doesn't mean I won't be devastated or in pain or have loss but I'll be okay. Like I'll kind of just be able to keep moving and it won't paralyze me.
Yeah.
um it won't extinguish my sense of autonomy or authenticity or selfhood or whatever you want to call it, because yeah, I think that's the key. It is like you say, we start like for certain people that really lack any of that trust internally, we start from a place of just very small things and it's very concrete. And oh, actually this feeling that but you're right. The idea is that extrapolates. Like now there is just an overall global trust that Okay, I don't need to go through that process every time. Exactly like what you're talking about actually with that thought thing. No, I don't even need to go through the process. Like the marble just runs through the maze or whatever. Like it
Yeah.
just, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
and it strikes me just to sort of circle back to something in the beginning, and I don't know, we might want to wrap up in a few minutes, but
Yeah, just by the hour. Yeah.
it's a super complex world, right? But then from this place, I might even say, you used the phrase a few minutes ago, figure it out. But what I might say is actually, I don't have to figure this out, right? Like there's like, 25 different things going on right now. And the solution is not to figure out all 25 of them. The solution is just like this trust, right? And then something's going to happen. And maybe 14 of these things will crash and burn and the other ones won't. But, if I just stay connected to this thing, I'll know what to do. I'll know what to do. Or even if something terrible happens, I can handle it. And then it creates this simplicity where I don't have to attend to all of the things at once and and be like that.
Wonder if it really just boils down very simply to, and I won't die. Like if we just put it in those terms, like again, like if you think about the ground, like if you really, like
Right.
all of those things really distilled down to just some version of, and I'll stay alive. And like and I'll still be here. And when I say I will still be here, I stay alive, I mean like me and my sense of having some kind of agency self in the world, not just like a dead zombie like version of oneself, but that I will still be here with an ability to move and act in the world. That I believe that there are still always options open to me, no matter how dire the circumstances. There are still options open to me from within myself of agency to some degree. I mean, obviously there are very real conditions that people are forced under that might restrict that, but that there is always some connection to that. And yeah, this has been wonderful. This has been
Yeah.
really, really wonderful. Yeah,
But it was a wild
I
ride, kind of. But
it was, but
on the ground.
I'm actually like I'm sort of both clearer and also have opened up lots more avenues of thinking on this topic. And that for me anyway, maybe because I'm just not very good at doing this, doesn't always happen in these conversations. And so like this is the opposite of that example that you gave before of like leaving one of these conversations and being like, oh, I don't really know why I spent my like 2 hours doing that this morning. And
Right.
now I'm going to be buzzing about this all day. And this just feels
Oh,
so nourishing and fruitful and just connecting and wonderful. Like, yeah, I really, really, I really feel like we're on the same page about it as well, which is very nice.
yeah, no, this is great. And I was trying to figure out how to like say this cleverly, but it's nighttime here, so maybe I can fall asleep and center circle the navel of my dreams.
Navel of the dream. Yeah, the navel of the dream.
we
Yeah,
didn't we didn't fully flesh that one out, so maybe we'll have to come back to that next
you can't. That's the whole point of the navel of the dream. You can't. We're just going round and round. Yeah, there is. I would actually really like to talk to you about that again
one. No,
because
that'd be great. That would definitely be more mysterious territory for me because
yeah,
but I'm curious. I'm curious. There's something about dreams that
yeah.
make it possible to do things that we can't do otherwise. And that would seem not unrelated to what we're talking about. Yeah,
Well,
I really
especially
enjoyed
when,
this.
yeah. I was just going to say briefly, very briefly, especially when you
Yeah,
think about as dreams being potentially a territory where there is just so many usual tensions are not at play. And so if we think about, even this idea of authentic resonance as being, as a requirement of it is a reduction of tension, like an easefulness in terms of passage and clarity. And um,
right,
then, think about dreams in a different sense. If you think about unconscious, conscious kind of, then that would be a point where, yeah, lots of these usual tensions, there's not really any reason for them to be active when you're asleep. Maybe there is, maybe but yeah, some of that would drop away. And so what that might allow then to kind of come up and for us to experience as imagery is really interesting.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Let's
So
do it
we'll,
again.
we'll have to pick up that thread next time.
Yeah, yeah. It's lovely to see you, Seth, and your skeleton. I always love seeing your skeleton. Has he got a name?
Bob.
Bob, of course. How could I not know that?